Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I am Sean Butler. Bugsy Malone's out for a walkies. It's ridiculously hot. I hope you are keeping yourselves happy and healthy and cool, doing the things you love with those you love to do them with. Guys, do me a favor as we bring to you your Saturday transfer news, views, and clues update today. Smash the granny out of the like button for me if you enjoy the content. Only if you enjoy it. Hit the subscribe if you haven't already. We're on the march to 34K. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's topics. And it's an interesting one, guys. We've got some updates, some sort of relatively new names, and a little bit of back and forth with some other things that are going on in the world of football that is probably a better fit for Football Inc. But of course, the connotations of other people doing business does indirectly affect Tottenham and their pursuits of their own transfer gains. By the way, we are on Football Inc. This video will be up in about maybe 3 o'clock UK time. At 3:30, we are on Football Inc. Johnny and I going through all of the latest around around the world of football. So keep a lookout for that. Also, guys, if you are interested in Spotify, this sort of content, but in the visual, video, or audio formats, we're on Spotify. And also, having lost access to my old Spurs Talk Show Instagram account, can't get back into it. So I'm happy to give that one up. I have started a new Instagram account. It's called The Spurs Talk Show, because unfortunately, someone's already taken the Spurs Talk Show handle. Myself, I just can't get into it. So if you're interested in Instagram, then make sure you get over to Instagram and follow me over there. Also follow Football Inc. over there as well now, which has its own Instagram handle as well, Instagram account. So, guys, let's get into it first. First and foremost, right, we've got some stories from Ben Jacobs out that Tottenham are turning their attentions to a couple of really interesting players. And maybe it's about time that Tottenham are pivoting finally to that monster six that we have been speaking about. The first name out of the traps that Ben Jacobs has said that we are looking at with a keen eye is Morten Frendrup of Genoa fame. Interesting six Morten Frendrup is. He's not the sort of person that you're going to look at and think on the stats, on FB reps, oh, that's what we're looking for. He's not a great passer with the ball. He's not a flashy player. He is just someone that reads the game really, really well. And that essentially is just a tackler in chief. Think of Palhinha, who we're going to come to in a minute. Think of like an Amadou Onana, who we're going to come to in a minute. It looks like Tottenham are looking for a monster six who's just good at tackling, breaking up play, interceptions, positional awareness, strength of mind, doesn't lose track or fall asleep when it comes to defensive responsibilities when we have the ball in the rest defense, which is not something that you can give the same kind of credit or credibility to the players that we currently have that have been either shoehorned into that role for much of the season, like a Rodrigo Bentancur, very great player, very, very talented player on the ball, and can do a lot of the things that other sixes, traditional sixes can't, with his ability to connect play, drive out of defense, and obviously Sir pings a lot. He's very, very good. But obviously where he lacks is the fact that he has that DNA of an 8, and he's always thinking to seek out the opportunity, not so much the threat. And so sometimes when we have the possession at the top end of the pitch under the Angeball system and we get transitioned on, then he can have and leave a big gap between him and the danger man in the 10, for example, that a traditional 6 just wouldn't let happen. And so we don't have it in him. Bissouma, it looks like he's leaving, even though he finished the season quite strongly for Tottenham. It doesn't look like he is going to be around. He might be going out to Fenerbahce to join up with Jose Mourinho. If Jose Mourinho is going to stay in Turkish football after the leaked messages that came out last week with regards to the Turkish FA and their attempts to try to essentially destroy Mourinho because they've tolerated him, quote unquote, tolerated him for too long. We shall see. All of that might be up in the air and that does, for what it's worth, bring over some indirect consequences to Tottenham. If Bissouma and or Sonny were going to sort of look and take a look in the direction of Turkish football, then there's only a couple of teams that they would have gone to. I would argue that Galatasaray don't need those sort of players and maybe have eyes on different areas of the pitch anyway. But in terms of Fenerbahce, well, it would have been a nice fit, and especially if they was hooking back up with Jose Mourinho. But of course, if Mourinho wants out because he is rightly so concerned by what came out last week, and of course those links that were involved in that whole shenanigans to Turkish mafia. I think that, if I'm not mistaken, then it's not just disgraceful that those text messages were sent and that they were leaked, but on top of that, of course, it can be quite scary and dangerous. So, not something that is a clear story, clear-cut answer there. But we shall see. But in any event, we're looking for a new 6. Clearly, that has been made very, very clear to us. We in the Tottenham fan base have been talking about João Palhinha for the longest time. A lot of us would have liked to have got him before he moved to Bayern Munich. His move to Bayern Munich hasn't really moved out. The agent of Palhinha is sort of trying to talk up stories of getting him back to the Premier League. There's rumours out he might return to Fulham. There's links today that he might go and join Manchester United. I don't really see where or why Manchester United would need him. Is he an Amorim type of player? Is he a sort of profile that Sir Jim Ratcliffe can get behind at 30 years old and would be on high wages? If that's the case, aren't you just kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul if you're trying to move players on from the Manchester United ecosystem that have been expensive and, aged players like a Casemiro, for example? Then is it really a like-for-like replacement? And is it something that they're going to get on board with? I doubt it, but you don't know. Man United seem to be linked with everybody right now, but of course they are cop-blocking themselves in the fact that they can't do any of the business that they want to do. Still no movement on the Mbeumo transfer, still no movement on Semenyo, still no movement on a new goalkeeper, still no movement on many players because they can't get rid of Sancho. They can't seem to get rid of Rashford. They can't seem to get rid of Onana, although there might be some movement there in the short term with Onana possibly going to Monaco, and consequently the timeline for some of the other clubs that are maybe waiting a little bit too long here to pull their own trigger, possibly because they have to wait until the 1st of July when the financial year starts again. Maybe they're already kind of, they have to get those numbers down to a certain level before the end of the year so that they can send it off to the Premier League for their audits for FFP reasons. I doubt that's going to affect Tottenham, but in any event, if Manchester United can move on Onana or one of these other players that seem to be stumbling blocks and stubborn stains that won't leave their club, then once they get one of those out the door, then they can kind of get back into the spend, and then maybe they can come back to Brentford and pay the 5 million difference or the 10 million difference that they currently are not willing to pay to Brentford for the likes of Brian Mbeumo. So Tottenham's time and other clubs' time might be slipping by the wayside if we're not active on that. But in any event, sorry guys, I've gone on a bit of a wander there. Amadou Onana and Morten Frendrup are the two names that Tottenham are linked with. Both players very similar. One of them, of course, has Premier League experience, left Everton, went to Aston Villa, and a player that is, a player that was part of my top 10 CDMs that Tottenham should be looking at in last year's summer window. We didn't end up getting any of them, but I think he was number 5 on that list. A really, really talented bulldozer, sort of scary guy. You're not going to want to come up against him in a physical duel. Same can be said for Morten Frendrup. Doesn't have the same experience in the Premier League. He's 20. I think he's 24 years old. I think Amadou Onana is about the same age, maybe slightly younger. They're both very, 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 very crafty players. Very strong, very physical, very good at breaking up the play, very good at reading the game, and sort of just being that protective zone, that kind of, I don't know, that condom, if you like, to the vulnerability of what can sort of come at you if you're not careful. But both players have their weaknesses, and the weaknesses are very stark. They're not playmaker type players. They're not people that are going to be sort of spraying and playing the ball around. And if you actually take a look, I'll just bring up, just for the argument's sake here, I'll show you Morten Frendrup's FB ref stats. I'm sure you're familiar enough with Onana, but let's show you what I mean here as we look at Morten Frendrup. As I say, he's out of Denmark. Maybe there's the link there as well. We're linked with a lot of players from Denmark right now because of, I think in no small part because of Thomas Frank and his arrival. Obviously, he's a countryman of that. But if you look at the sort of traditional stats here, you can see immediately that what he's very good at in terms of being compared to the other top 5 leagues, central midfielders. He's very good at the blocks, very good at interceptions, very good at tackles. But if you look at the rest of his game, doesn't get forward, doesn't do a hell of a lot in the way of shooting, doesn't really contribute too much in the way of passing. He's not, like I say, he's not going to be someone that kind of lights you up and gets you off the side, gets you out of your feet thinking that he's going to spread and play balls. Now, for me, this is a little bit of an interesting one because I think that in an Ange system, I would have been more than happy to have seen someone like Morten Frendrup come in, someone that can just sit in that 3-man midfield and protect and sort of lay the ball off to a Berghvall, lay it off to a Bentancur, let them do those things, but make sure that you're protecting those 2 centre-backs in a world where the full-backs have got right up the pitch and playing essentially as wide 10s, or where they have inverted and come into the midfield, but in so doing have left the gaps into the corners where the full-backs the centre-backs maybe have to keep one eye on the wingers that maybe are going to sort of break on you and do you damage. Having that 6 there, like a João Palhinha, like a Frendrup, like an Amadou Onana, or those sorts of players, are very useful in a very aggressive system. Now, Thomas Frank has suggested that he's going to play attractive football at Tottenham and that he wants to sort of, take the sort of lessons and the successes of what Ange did and build with it and run with it, and not to do a 180. He does, of course, also pivot to a back three at times, and in so doing, if you do have a back three, you don't really need that sort of six. You don't need a Frendrup, you don't really need an Onana, and you don't really need a Palhinha, because you have that protection from the third centre back, the width from the fullbacks and the wing backs in that scenario. They can get forward, and obviously you can get them sort of more diversity in narrower forward lines that come, the wingers that become more inside forwards. But the protection from that six role that's absent, that comes from maybe the more progressive, the more attractive and creative centre back, like a Romero, who could come forward and almost play as a six when we do have the ball, and can step back into a back three when we don't. One of the best passers in the Premier League, obviously has that sort of monster side to him as well. Or, like a Micky van der Ven that can bring the ball out and run with it and kind of create its own version of creativity, less so with passing, but more so with just sort of driving through that midfield. So if you're going to play a back three, you don't really need that monster six that is just a disruptor and a destroyer. You need to have that kind of culture as a midfielder that can do some of that creative work as well, especially in the back three system, but even in a back four system where you might go to a, more of, you would still need that kind of double pivot model in that world. Maybe there's an argument for someone like this, but if I'm entirely honest, I'm looking for a slightly different version of a six that has a little bit more creativity and a little bit more of a passing influence, someone that can switch play. Someone, I know that Johnny Cardoso sort of turned out to sort of disappoint in the in the Conference League final, and a lot of people have turned their attention away. It doesn't matter anyway. He's ended up going to Atletico Madrid, but someone that does have that ability to switch the play would have been really useful in an Ange system, and I think also in a system where you have that flexibility of Thomas Frank's utilisation of midfield players. So I'm not entirely sure that Onana and Frendrup are the most logical answers here for this particular type of system, but for sure they're very talented players. And look, if Thomas Frank does see that we need that six, and we have, almost like I say, not massive pivot away from the attractive attacking philosophy of what we saw with Ange Postecoglou, then there's absolutely room for it. I don't mind it for what it's worth, though. Amadou Onana is going to cost you a lot of money, and if you do that, you're getting Aston Villa out of a jam. That has to be part of the consideration as well. Are you really interested in giving money to a Manchester United for a player that might be useful, but in so doing, you open up their floodgates? You give them the key to their locked door that right now is financially stubborn. And if you make that deal, same with Aston Villa, are you going to release the Kraken a little bit in their ability to pivot and to reshape their own intentions, and in so doing, create more competition for yourself than what we might necessarily have? Because Aston Villa at the moment are a little bit cock-blocked by their own issues as well. Of course, they might be selling Emi Martinez towards Manchester United. We'll be talking about that if they do lose the other Onana, Andre Onana, I think it is, from Manchester United going to Monaco. Then they might turn their attentions to Emi Martinez. And again, Manchester United then can get back into gear, and that becomes problematic for all of us. Let's move on from Onana and from Morten Frendrup. The next one, Destiny Udogie. This is a really interesting story. Those last two, by the way, from Ben Jacobs. This particular story, Destiny Udogie, the agent of Destiny Udogie, Stefano Antonelli, has basically said that there's no chance that he will leave Tottenham this summer at all for anything less than 50 million euros, so 45 million quid. That's the kind of baseline. But that there is action, there is interest, but it's unlikely he would leave Tottenham. Now, for me personally, we played this game last night on the live stream when we were doing transfer news, views, and booze. I hope everyone's head is a little bit dusty this morning if you were playing the game with us. We were talking about, what players in the team can you see being a part of, a contributing factor to a Tottenham side that might be a part of a title conversation? Not saying necessarily a win, but if the plan is to win the league, then what members of the squad do you think are good enough right now to be a part of the team in 3 years, if we can get into that world where we can continue to progress and go for something and be a part of a conversation, as difficult as it might be, to win the league within 3 years? And Destiny Udogie seems to be universally accepted as one of those members. And so to see that Stefano Antonelli is saying that he won't leave for less than 50 million euros, 45 million quid, but that rumours out of Italy, AC Milan, Inter, Napoli, all the big teams in Italy are very much interested in bringing him back to Italy. There's rumours out saying that they think they can get him for something like £26 million, which I've got no idea where that number came from, but I think it's just insane to think that there would be any chance that would happen. But we shall see. Destiny Udogie agent Stefano Antonelli saying very unlikely for less than 50. Micky, sticking with Italy, guys, Micky Moore has been of interest to Juventus at the moment. Damien Comoli, ex-Tottenham director of football Comoli, who's now in charge of Juventus's transfer strategy and maybe having conversations with a certain Fabio Paratici, whose transfer ban expires, I believe, in 10 days' time. We shall see if there's any more noise or news about him coming out soon. Well, the story is that Comoli really wants to bring Micky Moore to Juve to play backup or rotation to Sal. Now, it's a fascinating one, this. First of all, I don't believe it will happen. The story is more of a permanent transfer, not a loan deal. I don't think it will happen. I think Micky Moore, he's 17 years old. Is he really going to want to go to Italy, learn a new language, be out of his kind of comfort zone? We shall see. Of course, he got injured in the England under-21 game. He's turned his ankle. I think it was a sprain, nothing more serious than that. But it's probably cost him his tournament. But in terms of will he be effective for Tottenham's pre-season? Likely no. Now, I guess the concern here about Micky Moore for Tottenham fans is, I lost count the amount of times I've had to have this conversation with you guys. We've got about 11 wingers in our team at the moment, in our squad. We need to strip that number down to maybe 4 or 5, 6 max to be able to bring in someone that can improve us, like a Semenyo, who we'll talk about in a moment, or like an Mbumo. And so you have to think about, well, what's the kind of correct path? Now, Micky Moore last season, everyone that was saying, Matisse Tell is clock blocking Micky Moore's minutes. Why are we sort of blocking his pathway to the first team? Well, now people are saying that it's time for a loan because he isn't quite ready, and that the standard of the loan should be somewhere like West Brom under Ryan Mason, where he can play competitive football at the Championship level, see how he gets on, and bring him back in 12 months' time. Now, I'd be okay with that. I am in that bucket that think he isn't quite good enough yet. But do I want to sell him, not knowing what level he could get to? He's one of those quote unquote wonder kids that are coming through the academy. And for me, I don't want to sell him to Juve. I don't want to sell him even with like a sell-on fee. I want to see one of our own have a chance in our own team to see what we can do with him. I just don't think that he's necessarily ready yet. So if there's any truth to this story, first of all, I find it strange to see if he would want to go to Juve at this stage just to play backup, is what the quote said here, to Sal. If his issue with being at Tottenham is not getting the minutes, then why would he go somewhere else where he's already been kind of quoted as, or the idea is quoted as saying he's not going to get the minutes there either? And Sal is an absolute baller. So I very much doubt he would be used in anything more than sparringly or in sort of cup competitions, which is what he could get at Tottenham if he stayed. But surely if he really wants to progress and develop, then the best place to be would be somewhere where you're pretty confident that the manager will use him, will be familiar with him, and where the level of football is good enough for him to really learn and show his worth. And then, of course, you can compare those sorts of outputs to the likes of someone like Emmanuel Solomon, who did it last season at the Championship level. So for me, I think if we are going to loan out Micky Moore, then West Brom would be the most obvious. Just to come back on my list here, Palhinha. So the agent... I did mention that the agent of Palhinha does want him back in the Premier League, and he has been offered to Manchester United. I want to get your thoughts, guys. When you bake in the sort of new system and the fact that maybe 25% of the time in certain scenarios we're going to be playing possibly a back three with wing backs, do you think that Palhinha is still the most ideal target? I know we have spoken about Palhinha forever on this channel, and I know everyone in the community we're all in sort of consensus here that 35 million quid. It seems like great value. You get the leader, you get the established guy, you get the experienced guy that's done it in the Premier League. He's got Champions League experience in a crucial position. It does make a lot of sense. It's just, is he good enough at the other areas of football that a Thomas Frank system in a back four would need? And in a back three system where you don't really need that enforcer, are you basically getting value from a player that the system won't, again, potentially need in a back three model where you can use more preferably more developed and more creative centre backs to kind of kill two birds with one stone? It's an interesting one. I'm just a little bit concerned about the lacking in certain areas of the game, but for sure, don't get me wrong, guys. It's not a dislike of the player, nor do I undervalue him. I think he brings a lot of the things that we need, and I'm sure there will be utilisation in a Thomas Frank system, a double pivot where Thomas Frank can use a Palhinha, play him alongside a player that is just afforded the opportunity to ping balls. Think about Lucas Berghvall's ability to put his head up and spray and play into channels. His peripheral vision is fantastic. He'll be expected to do a lot more and let Palhinha take care of the business, win the ball back. Kind of like a yin and yang, good cop, bad cop kind of vibe. And that to me is interesting. I'm just not sure he's as needed under Thomas Frank as he would have been under Ange Postecoglou. Last story for you guys before we round off. Ornstein did come out yesterday and said that Tottenham, of course, David Ornstein, right, when he speaks, you do listen. He's maybe in that kind of tier. He's definitely a tier one type of category guy. Doesn't make things up for the Athletic. He came out on the Give Me Sport website, though, and said that that Semenyo to Spurs is there's truth to the story, that Tottenham are very much looking at him, and that Semenyo does want to come to Tottenham. He'd be very interested. However, £70 million seems to be a bridge too far for Tottenham. They don't necessarily want to break the transfer record for Semenyo. There's question marks necessarily about whether there's value for money. And look, for me, as I've said to you 1,000 times in the last week on the Football Inc. and on this channel, I just feel like it's not so much the number, it's the market. I think right now, everybody is in a Mexican standoff. No one wants to pull the first trigger and fire the first bullet because they don't know if they're overpaying or underpaying, because Liverpool have come in and absolutely smashed the ball out of the park with everything they're doing. They have clearly got hundreds of millions of pounds that they want to spend. They want to get their rebuild done all in one window, and they're willing to pay crazy fees for people. But elsewhere in the market, not a lot is happening because I think buying clubs are not sure where the market is, and selling clubs don't want to sell players under the correct valuation, because if they do have a superstar, they don't necessarily want to let them go cheap if the market is better and stronger and more closely aligned to what Liverpool are doing. But we won't know until A, the Club World Cup finishes and some of the bigger teams get back to business, and B, July the 1st rolls around, when 95% of football clubs move into the next financial year, and so have that wiggle room on their PSR and FFP to be able to do things now that are not going to be audited until next year for the season after's accounts. It's finely poised and delicately balanced. But for me, I do think that Semenyo is a cracking player. But if it's a case of 70 million for him or 70 million for Mbeumo, if that's the number, as I say, you can't rest on your laurels and sit on your hands for too long here, because other teams will come in. And right now we have an opportunity. Pick one. Do not get stung by paralysis through analysis. Pick one and go for it. For me, the option is Mbeumo. Of course, there were stories out yesterday from Duncan Castle, saying that from his what he's heard, this idea that he wants to go to Man United and not to go to Tottenham isn't true, that he would go to Tottenham, but no one yet is paying that £5 million. And as I said on yesterday's update, £5 million here, are we missing it for a biscuit? Is this Jack Grealish 2.0 all over again? And I don't really see what the hold up is, apart from maybe the fact that we have to wait until July the 1st. But you can get the deal done now. You can get the deal done and just make the first payment on July the 1st, right? So I'm not sure what it is that is kind of slowing everybody up. It's not just a Tottenham thing. It's a whole transfer market thing. I genuinely do think a lot of it's down to this financial year. And remember that I think Liverpool finished their year in May. I think they kind of cut one of their months short previously, and so they have a slightly different year. And remember, Aston Villa took the 13-month, I think it was last year, to get themselves out of the FFP situation. So Aston Villa might not actually get into their new year until August the 1st rather than July the 1st, like everybody else. Don't quote me on that, but that's what I think is happening. That's your update, guys. I'm sure there'll be other bits and pieces out. You might even see me later on tonight for another live stream, because I can't stay away from you guys. I love you all. Like, subscribe, and comment. Let me know your thoughts on the players we've spoken about. And also, like I say, if you are interested in audio and podcast stuff, Spotify is in the description. I'm trying to grow that, so please, if you do like that stuff, please get over there and follow. And Instagram, the Spurs Talk Show. There you go, guys. Links in the description. See you on the next one. 3:30. We're on Football Inc. Get over there, like it, and be there or be square. Take care, guys. Bye.